It's really great that you've all come, to see me speak and to see the others speak as well. I really want to say that I'm speaking about Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which some of you may not have even heard about, some of you may have, but I'm starting from the beginning of what I know, so that those who don't understand, will probably be able to join some dots. Really, it's about an agenda that was put together over a long period of time, going right back to the 1970s and before, but it really came into being in 1992 at an event called the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And really, it was a plan to, on the face of it, it looked as though it was to save the planet. And that's how it was sold to 178 world leaders. So that's every country in the world. It was sold as a way of saving the planet from climate change, or they called it then global warming. And as we know now, it's very questionable science that they used, because they said that it was all anthropogenic, which means it's human-made, it's man-made. So we were the bad ones, and it was a way of demonizing the human race and being able to own every resource on the planet. Now, this agenda was put together by a lot of oil billionaires and bankers, and there were a lot of climate lobbyists there, and this was really sold as a way of saving the planet. And of course, who wouldn't want to save the planet? But unfortunately, as we can see, the way it's panning out, it's more about control than it is about environmentalism. And I'm going to be really making that point, that it really is more about control than environmentalism. So this agenda, it was launched at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. It was also called Sustainable Development. It was written as a 42-chapter document, which is here. And it talks about sustainability and conservation, but at its heart, it seeks to divide man from nature. And the idea is that we live in smart cities, in urban environments, and man is kind of removed from nature. And actually, the countryside is off limits. Now, this was the long-term plan. They actually had a plan called the Wildlands Project in America that showed all the smart cities. Now, we're seeing this talk of smart cities now, and we're seeing the 15-minute cities popping up, where people are restricted from movement. And this is the slow tiptoe towards a totalitarian agenda that they have planned for us. And I'm going to go through this step by step. So really, it's a way of controlling all the resources, taking control of land, sea, minerals, and just about everything on the planet under the deception of saving the world. Nothing in Agenda 21, the Rio Declaration, even acknowledges the idea that humans were born free and are sovereign over governments that they create. Nothing acknowledges the idea that government's first responsibility is to protect the inherent freedom of its citizens, particularly the freedom to own and use property. To the contrary, everything about the Rio Declaration documents aims to limit human freedom and to restrict the use of private property until it can be placed in the public domain. So, as sweeping as they are the first and final march to a global governance. And we're seeing this global governance coming now, where local governments are being shifted to a more unitary government, and the WEF and the United Nations seem to be making an awful lot of decisions, and the World Health Organization, that our own governments should be making. And this is about global governance, because it's not people-led, it's actually governance-led. So it's not government, it's governance, which is a big difference. So I'm going to be running you through the Club of Rome documents that actually made up the bones of Agenda 21, which was launched at the Earth Summit, because it goes back quite a long way, and it's quite telling as to how they view the human race and how it was really these globalists, these big money people that wanted to gain control of just about everything. And I'll just show you how it's panning out right now in our world. So we're going to go back to, let me just do this. The Club of Rome. Has anybody heard of the Club of Rome? Yes. A few people have. Good. Well, the Club of Rome are a sort of crisis think tank. They were put together in 1968. It's a global think tank for the United Nations. It was founded in 1968 at the Rockefeller private estate in Bellagio, Italy, by a chap called Aurelio Pecce. He was an Italian industrialist for the Rockefeller Foundation and the UN. The main purpose for the Club of Rome is to formulate a crisis through which the world would be united under a one world government. Global problems require global solutions. So they just used to chuck around ideas to try and formulate crises that would actually unite us in a common cause, because they knew that the weakness of human beings is they want to help, they want to be kind, and this is being used. So the very first Club of Rome report that they brought out was this one. This was in 1970. This is called Limits to Growth. And it was all about finite resources. And it was all based on computer modelling. And they made wild assumptions about what the population would be in 1980, 1990. And it was way out of whack. It was because it was computer modelled, and we know where that got us. And it all came out of Imperial College. This was pretty much the same. This was a computer modelled scenario. What if the population got way out of control, and really it was about finite resources. There's not enough to go round. It was thinking in a lack. There's not enough to go round. Therefore, population has to be dealt with. So that was number one. It was all about depopulation and population control. And then the next one, this ties in really with Zbigniew Brzezinski coming into play in 1970. I mean, he looks pretty evil, doesn't he? Yes. Because there was a technocracy movement in the 1930s that's very similar to kind of what's happening now, and I'll go into that after this slide. Zbigniew Brzezinski reinvented or relaunched the technocracy movement in 1970, around the same time that Limits to Growth was written or published. And for him, it was all about bringing in what he called the new economic order. And it was a way of having a carbon economy. So this is where the carbon the thought of the carbon economy recently happened, which was in 1970. Prior to that, they had the same idea in the 1930s, which I'll go into. I'll just say a bit about Zbigniew Brzezinski. He wrote a book around the same time in the 1970s called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era. He studied political science at Columbia University with M.K. Hubbard and Howard Scott, who were key in forming the new economic order, resource-based economy, CO2 carbon taxing. So it was the technocratic age. Everything must be controlled and owned. So that all came out of the technocracy movement of the 1930s, because Brzezinski was around then, and he kind of relaunched it in the 1970s. So the technocracy movement was a movement in the 1930s after the Depression, because really what had happened is that they'd had this Great Depression and people had lost faith in, quite rightly, in bankers and in politicians. And so there was a whole ideology of political science, and it came out of Columbia University, and it was about having a resource-based economy as opposed to a price-based economy that we have now. But it didn't take off, really. It was introduced by the Trilateral Commission, Zbigniew Brzezinski, in 1973, as the new economic order, known as sustainable development and the green economy. Many alumni of Columbia are heading up the present agenda. Klaus Schwab was there, Emma Taietzioni, who's the communitarian man, George Soros, David Rockefeller. They were all in a group of technocrats trying to implement what was then global warming to create a new carbon-based economy. So now push forward to 1987, and this was published. This is another Club of Rome report. This is called Our Common Future. Now this particular Club of Rome report had a different meaning and purpose. It was written by a lady called Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Prime Minister of Norway, and she she wrote it with Maurice Strong, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time of the Earth Summit, and they both had this. There was this ideology that we had to make the world more equitable. It was all about equality. If anything, it's like a second Marshall Plan. That's what it was described as by one of the whistleblowers at the Earth Summit in 1992. It was a second Marshall Plan to make things more equitable between East and West. So in this we're called the West is called the polluting rich West. And reparations had to be made to make it more equitable to India and China and the East. So all of this, a lot of money and industrialization was shifted over to India and China during 1987 to fulfill the Brundtland Report. And it was all under the guise of equality, which is a very sort of Agenda 21 communitarian term. Is keeping everything equitable, but actually what it did was it destroyed the West. All our manufacturing went over there, and we stopped manufacturing anything around that time. And so what the idea was really that the West had to be destroyed, and that we're seeing that now. I'll just say the report on the World Commission, wealth needs to be distributed from the wealthy countries to poorer nations as wealthy countries are destroying the planet, India and China. Well, the thing is that their emissions are sky high now, and we pay the carbon taxes, they don't. And that's really why there was the big row at the Paris Accord in 2015, when a lot of the world leaders walked out and said, this is ridiculous. We in Europe are being carbon taxed, and our emissions are far lower than the East, and yet nothing is, and that's still the case. They're not being sanctioned. So that's what it was all about. It was about inequality, not equality. So then, fast forward again to 1991, just after the Berlin Wall had come down, and just before the Earth Summit. And this was the last Club of Rome report that made the bones of Agenda 21. And this was called the First Global Revolution. This is actually falling apart. I've got to get it mended. So this was really about finding an enemy to unite humanity. As they'd mentioned before, they needed to unite humanity under a common threat. And they found that enemy. And I'll just find the quote, because it will show you who the enemy is and how they would get to that point of finding the enemy. Now, this is on page 108, just before 115. The need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. States have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by designating external enemies. The scapegoat practice is as old as mankind itself. When things become too difficult at home, divert attention by adventure abroad, bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or one invented for the purpose. With the disappearance of the traditional enemy, a temptation is to designate a scapegoat, religious or otherwise, ethnic minorities whose differences are disturbing. They just go on and on about trying to identify ways of inventing an enemy. And then they found the enemy on page 115. And they say, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages and famine and the like would fit the bill. We came up with the idea. And in their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat, which demands the solidarity of all people. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it's only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. And that is why we are under attack. Every single one of us, worldwide, are under attack, because they identified man as the enemy of humanity. So if we're feeling under attack, that is why, and we are. So people say to me, oh, so you think that a whole load of powerful people are trying to take over the world and attack us? And I say yes, because all the evidence is in these Club of Rome reports and all the other documents that I have. So really, we're under attack. Now, this is Maurice Strong, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations in 1992, and he, for a long time, had been planning to put the Earth Summit together to bring in and actually implement all of this. Now, he's an oil billionaire, so he had already, with all his mates, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and Al Gore and all the people that were at the Earth Summit, they had all already invested in the carbon credit banks to make a fortune. They knew the lie, but they were going to make loads of money, and they were going to be able to control all the resources of the planet, which is what they have always intended to do. And he was the grandfather of Agenda 21. He headed up the Earth Summit. He was a member of the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, the Council for Foreign Relations, a member of the Fabian Society. He was a self-confessed communist in ideology and a capitalist in methodology. So that is a complete communitarian kind of description of someone, actually, where they use corporate capitalism, but the people have to be controlled, so it's a form of communism. So he's a very strange man. He was exiled to China to avoid prison in the US for being involved in the oil for food scandal in 1995, where the UN Security Council made a resolution to supply Iraq with food in exchange for oil. There were revelations of corruption, of funds involving Maurice Strong, Adnan Khashoggi, and many other oil billionaires. He loved China and the Communist Party and the communist system, and he was friends with Chairman Mao. So that really shows you. And he did say we may get to the point where the way of saving the world will be for industrial civilization to collapse. And actually, he did add to that and say, isn't it our job to see this happen? So they actually want order out of chaos. They want to create this chaotic world so that they can seize control. And he said at the Earth Summit, the effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound re-engineering of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. Now that, for me, that quote really sums up what we've got coming, because having a consequence of every human action, an environmental consequence of every human action, is the way that they're bringing in something called environmental and social governance, which I'll be talking about later, which will destroy businesses. And it's all linked to the blockchain, surveillance, capitalism, everything in one place so that they can surveil and see exactly what you're doing how you're doing it, and whether you and taxing you at the same time. But that'll all come a bit later on, because it might be a bit too difficult to understand at the moment. This is called the Global Diversity Assessment. This is a huge book that I bought over 10 years ago. And it's very heavy. And it really is an inventory of just about everything on our planet. Every mineral, every animal, everything. And how it's going to be managed under sustainable development. So all of this, and at no point really, that it only mentions human beings on page, I think it's 993 or 933, I can't remember. I think it's 933. And it, oh, sorry, I've skipped. Here we are. And it talks about humans living in human settlement zones with buffer zones in between. So this really is all about conserving nature, but really it's not about conserving the human condition. It really is all about nature conservation and how the land needs to be managed by scientists and bodies like the World Wildlife Fund and the United Nations Environmental Programme. All of this really is about keeping man away from nature. Now we're seeing that happening, where rights to roam are being destroyed. And we're finding that farmers who've always grazed their cattle and their sheep on Dartmoor and Exmoor are being told, no, you can't do that anymore under the environment. So the land is being taken away and put into state control. And we are not allowed to use it. Yeah, in this, they say private property and farmland are unsustainable. 75% of the US to be given over to self-willed land and stocked with bears and wolves and wild vegetation. It's page 993 of the Global Diversity Assessment. The Wildlands Project plans to remove 50% of the United States population into urban areas or human settlement zones consisting of high-rise dwellings situated near railway tracks. The railroad will be the means of transport, private cars to be phased out. The Obama stimulus was the source of funding for this project. By 2030, they plan to force European farmers to vacate 75 million acres, roughly the size of Poland, under sustainable development. Now, we've seen what happened to the Dutch farmers. I mean, did anybody follow the Dutch farmers? They're being told they can't grow, they can't use fertilizer. And they did beat the government in the end. I think they're still under struggle. But all of this is happening with our farmers as well now, where there are farmers being told not to farm. You must rewild your land. They're offering farmers big subsidies. I'll go into that a bit later. Just to say a personal thing, this is something that really woke me up. I mean, I was on the road to finding out about Agenda 21. But in 2014, I think it was 65 square miles of Somerset was completely underwater. And there was no help from the government or the Environment Agency at that time. And I went down to Boroughbridge, which is near me, where the River Parrett had burst its banks, and we were sandbagging all night. And what everyone noticed is that there was no help from the government at all, or the Environment Agency. It was very, it was very, it was awful. There was a wonderful aid agency called CALSA who'd flown in. They're a Sikh organisation. They'd flown in from Haiti, from the earthquake at Haiti, to help us sandbag overnight because people were losing their homes. They were losing their businesses, their homes, everything, and there was no help available. And I was watching the water rise, and I happened to meet a journalist down there because all the TV companies were on the bridge watching the water rise, sort of telling everybody on the news that it was terrible, but there was no help available. And there was one journalist that I spoke to down there, and he was from the Telegraph, and his name was Christopher Booker. And sadly, he's passed on now, but we became friends that day because he said, "Do you know what this is?" He said, "It's Agenda 21. And I said, "I've been studying that." And he said, "Go and look at Policy 6 of the Environment Agency, Policy 6. And I did. And that pink area, that's the area that flooded. Now, that was designated as a floodplain in 1997. And it had come from the Ramsar Treaty, which was in 1976, about wetlands, sustainable development wetlands. And this was designated as a floodplain by Baroness Young, who just said, Agenda 21, just add water, because we need to protect wildlife. Wading birds, we need to protect, the bird wildlife, the wetland birds. And that's why and it wasn't, it was crazy because there were deers floating belly up along the River Parrett, hedgerows underwater. That was not an environmental programme. It wasn't conserving nature. It was destroying people's land. And, people have never been able to sell their houses there, and loads of businesses went out of business. It is actually in a very, very wet area, and later on they spent something like 25 million on a bird sanctuary right next to it. So I think it was all part of that thing that they needed to use. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in because that was a personal experience. The Environment Agency did turn up eventually, and the army turned up for a photo opportunity. They turned up, they lined up, held sandbags, and then the BBC shot it, and then they went. So it just shows you. And Prince Charles turned up as well. He was taken on a throne, a wooden throne, down the banks of the River Parrett because he didn't want to get his feet dirty, and people carried him along the banks of the River Parrett. I mean, it was just awful. The whole thing was just so awful. Anyway, going on from the Earth Summit, something was set up called ICLEI just after the Earth, or during the Earth Summit, and it's called the International Committee for Local Environmental Initiatives. This was a way of bringing Agenda 21 from the global right down to local. And this is why Agenda 21 is now in every single town council in our country, and this is who is pushing climate change. The whole climate emergency, net zero, because ICLEI was set up to implement Agenda 21 right down from global to local, and that was the beginning of the whole net zero thing. Hang on, what's that? Oh yeah, I've done that one. And you'll find that your community might be infiltrated with a whole sort of communitarian ideology. And a lot of these companies, this is corporations that will turn up in your town to push this agenda. There's unlimited. We had People for Power. These are NGOs. These are government NGOs are sent to push the whole climate change ideology within your community. Because that's how they do it. They infiltrate. They really do. And I'm just going to speak very briefly about communitarianism, because I've noticed it in my town. And it's a very pernicious ideology because it sounds so worthy. It's all about equality. I'm just going to say something about... it's an ideology promoted by a man called Amitai Etzioni. He was an Israeli-born American professor of sociology, born in 1929. Etzioni argued for a carefully crafted balance between individual rights, balance between social responsibilities of the community. Individual rights are replaced by the rights of the community, which are vaguely defined. Laws protecting the individual are outmoded and must be balanced against the sensibilities of a global market, trade agreements, tariffs, constitutions, and religious freedoms, all these identified as barriers to sustainable development. David Cameron called this big society. Oh dear, I've lost my cursor. What's happened? I'll just go back. He called it big society. Communitarians are global thinkers, movers and shakers. They seek to destroy representational government, voting, private property ownership, and promote regionalisation. I don't know if you've had any of your councils brought together under unitary. Yeah, well, this is what it's all about. It's to take the people further away from the decision making so that they actually make the decisions. And they're saying, oh, it's all about the community, but it's not. It's a lie. They the anti-communitarian manifesto. If you do want to read up on communitarianism, there's a wonderful lady who sadly has passed on now, and there is a PDF online called the Anti-Communitarian Manifesto or Communitarian Manifesto. So do look at that. It's by Nikki Rapana. And Nordica Friedrich, and they were amazing. And that's a picture of Amatai Etzioni. I mean, it was just literally an ideology that was invented in 1958. He was at university then. But anyway, it was this century. It just came up. Another thing that came out of the Earth Summit was the IPCC. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, this was really implemented to push the whole global warming agenda. But actually, it was only scientists who were in the employ of the United Nations and the governments, and they were pushing the bad science. You will find that anyone that argues about climate change, they'll say, oh, but the IPCC says, because they're supposed to be the body that knows about this. And unfortunately, it was made really, it was made up of policymakers. It was set up after the Earth Summit in 1992, made up of policymakers, biologists, and scientists paid to push the narrative on anthropogenic global warming. They didn't push the disinformation, their research fund. If they didn't push the disinformation, their research funding was taken away. And that's the problem, is everybody's in the employ of big government and big corporations who donate money only if you come out with the right science, the skewed science. And that's why most of the whistleblowers are retired. So that's what you'll find. Now, there's the 3 E's of sustainable development: social equity, economic prosperity, ecological integrity. Now, social equity, the individual gives up personal rights for the needs of the community. Economic prosperity, free market replaced by public-private partnerships. Now, we're seeing that now, with the takeover of everything by public-private partnerships. Everything's going into corporate hands. And international wealth transfer. And then you've got ecological integrity, the individual rights subordinated to environmental needs. So everything is for the environment, and it's really not about the individuals. And then we had ClimateGate in 2009. I'm just going quickly Ralph covers all this, but you had the hockey stick illusion, Michael Mann at the Hadley Research Centre in the University of East Anglia. You've the best dissection of global warming is a case study in groupthink by Christopher Booker, the very man that I met down at the flooding of the Somerset Levels. And that's a free PDF. If you really want to know the ins and outs of the climate change scam, Christopher Booker is your man, because it is a case study in groupthink. He was at the Paris Accord, and he tells all the stories about all the shenanigans that went on there. And the ClimateGate, it was basically in 2009, 1,079 emails were hacked at the University of East Anglia and the Hadley Research Centre by a US intelligence agency. The content of these emails were damning for the global warming lobby. Michael Mann from Penn State University was encouraging the scientists at these institutions to falsify the data, to hide the decline. in real-time temperature, data, and alter the graphs. The famous hockey stick graph was one of the lies that came out of ClimateGate, but the original emails were revealing a huge lie, shoring up the industry of climate change. And so he tried to hide the decline by making the temperature look as though it went up, and that created that sort of hockey stick thing. And this is I've nicked this from Ralph's presentation, really. Nature needs CO2, and basically this is what happens to nature, plants, if they don't have CO2. And we all know it's the gas of life. This is what keeps, trees and plants alive in order to give us oxygen. So at 800 parts per million, it's fine, and then 400 it gets worse, and then goes down and down and down until really low CO2, everything dies. So, it's such a lie, and unfortunately, so many people have bought into it, and so many people also conflate carbon monoxide with CO2. I mean, CO2 it's clean. It's not filthy, but the fact that it's got carbon in it. The word carbon. And it's funny, when I was reading this global diversity assessment, they talk about carbon monoxide a lot, which is what comes out of cars without catalytic converters. But suddenly it morphed in the sort of 1990s into carbon dioxide, which is crazy. Now, I just want to talk really about how the acceleration happened between, they were using climate change to sort of really push the agenda, and it wasn't working quite fast enough. And it seems that this particular document, this is from 2010, it's called the Rockefeller Lockstep document, and it comes from you can look this up. It comes from the Rockefeller Foundation, a document from the Rockefeller Foundation, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development 2010. And it was called the Lockstep document. And the Lockstep document was a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. A virus emerges from a third world country and rapidly spreads across the world, destroying the economies of the West. Governments use the virus as an excuse to advance technocratic surveillance, implementing transhumanist and biological technologies and passports. In this scenario, the masses blindly welcome the tyranny, abandoning their sovereignty for the greater good. Now, does that sound familiar? Yeah. Well, that was in 2010. And afterwards, they came up with these other ones, these other rather... obviously, that's Lockstep. There's one called Clever Together, Hack Attack, and Smart Scramble. Now, these are just scenarios, what if, but sometimes the what if scenarios do come true, and this is the worry. Clever Together, a world in which highly coordinated and successful strategies emerge for addressing both urgent and entrenched worldwide issues. Strong cooperation on a range of issues drives technological breakthroughs that combat disease, climate change, and energy shortages. That's Clever Together. And then you've got Hack Attack. Due to a cyber attack, an economically unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weaken, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. And then you've got Smart Scramble at the end, which is probably the rather depressing one. An economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. So they've got scenarios for everything because they're controlling its problem, reaction, solution. It's the Hegelian dialect. They create the problem. And so they've got all these scenarios all worked out. Now, this is when Agenda 21 became Agenda 2030, and it was on the 15th of September 2015, and it was really it's just a deadline, and it happened in Rome, and the Pope was involved. In the last week of September 2015, Pope Francis met President Obama to make his keynote speech to the UN General Assembly on the future of the world and to unveil Agenda 2030. They launched the 17 goals to be achieved by 2030. back in 1965, Pope Paul the sixth pledged the loyalty of the Catholic Church to effectively making the Catholic Church the UN's servant on earth. So the Vatican is very, very linked to the United Nations and supports them in everything. The local deployment of Agenda 21 was completed, and Agenda 2030 brings it into the global arena. So that's when that happened in 2015. And of course, in 2016, ahead of time, we get these two books were written and published, which nobody really made any deal about until after the pandemic, because they were written for post-pandemic. The Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, and 1968 to the present. You see, this is Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the WEF, and he's always said you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So this is global communism. It's about taking everything, private property ownership, nobody having cars, nobody flying anywhere. You live in your smart city apartment. Everything's delivered by drone. This is his dream. This guy. He's a madman, I swear. Anyway. Yeah, and this is Klaus Schwab. He's got a very dark history. He's a founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and he even said in one of his interviews, "In outbreaks, the first big step towards an unprecedented control over mankind." I mean, he says it out loud. He says the most appalling things. I mean, he says that, really his dream, and it is happening, is to have a fully robotic, automated workforce, so that people are then put onto UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, which is being trialled in Wales at the moment. So it's really making the human redundant, and this is kind of what he wants to do. Now, his dark history is that, and this is a man that's in control of our government, actually. The WEF, the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations are in charge. We don't have a party political system anymore. All the reason why all the decisions are being made the same, whether it's Labour, Conservative, whatever, is because they're not really in control. It's the people above. So his father, Eugene Schwab, had an engineering company called Escher Miss Engineering in Ravensburg, Germany in the 1930s. He collaborated with the Nazi quest to create nuclear technology. He was instrumental in creating machinery vital to the Nazi war effort. Klaus Schwab obviously took over Escher Miss in the 1960s, and he was involved with illegal nuclear development in South Africa, supporting the apartheid regime in the 1960s. He heads up the Davos meetings every year since 1971 for global leadership, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or is it the Fourth Reich? I think it's the Fourth Reich. So, and this is what he's got. He heads up this global leadership program. It's a bit like Common Purpose, where people are trained to take leadership positions all over the world. And all of these people, there's a reason all these national leaders, they sound the same. They all say the same things: build back better, all of that. They're all graduates of Schwab's indoctrination camp for young global leaders. And all these people have been through it. Bill Gates and Zelensky and Trudeau, all of them have been through it. And Angela Merkel was one of the first ones. It was established in Schwab's Global Leaders for Tomorrow, established in 1992, again, just after the Earth Summit, now called Leadership Council for Future Technologies. His first students were Angela Merkel, Nicolas Sarkozy, Tony Blair. There are currently, I think it's 1,300 graduates, including Jacinda Ardern, Emmanuel Macron, Jean-Claude Juncker, Justin Trudeau, Vladimir Putin. They've all got quite sparse CVs, but have been put into positions of supreme power. So they're there as puppets, really. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. Now, we get to 2019, and we've had Greta Thunberg in the fake crossing of the, in the boat, where she didn't really go on a boat all around the world. She was flown everywhere because she got seasick. It was owned by the Rockefellers. It was all a bit of a farce, and nobody took much notice of her. So climate change wasn't working, and they have to accelerate the 17 goals. So what do? They hold a meeting in Geneva, the Strategic Framework Partnership meeting. And that was in June 2019 to accelerate the 17 goals. And they had this, they're very happy. They've found a way of accelerating the goals. And this is how they did it. 4 months later, they have another event called Event 201 at Johns Hopkins facility in New York. Same people, Antonio Guterres from the United Nations, Klaus Schwab, and other people from the United Nations. And in my opinion, this was to accelerate, and because of all the evidence is there, they had to accelerate the 17 goals. And this was a really good way of doing it, because whilst we were sleeping in lockdown, all the infrastructure for their global control went in. We were literally under house arrest, and all the biometrics were going into the supermarkets. All the human tills went. We had suddenly all the machine tills, which have facial recognition on them. We had LED lampposts going up. We had all the fibre optic stuff going into the ground. All of this infrastructure. Now, they weren't locked up. All these people were not locked up. We were. But the infrastructure for their global control went in globally, everywhere. So the lockdown, that was the purpose. And suddenly the WHO, gained massive power during that time. And we're now, unfortunately, this is being battled in our parliament and in the courts, because the WHO, our parliament, have given the WHO, the World Health Organization, the power to implement lockdowns in the future. So our government won't be in charge. It will be the World Health Organization who will mandate things. This will be given the WHO powers to implement lockdowns like the ones we saw in Shanghai and Beijing, using increased totalitarian rule and house arrests. We haven't elected these people. Who are they? This body. I mean, we elect our own politicians. And yet the power has been given over to these people. And I'm going to say a bit about the NHS, because the privatisation, the digitalisation of the NHS is... My daughter works in the NHS and she's seeing this now. The Secretary of Health and Social Care has announced that NHSX, NHS Digital, will merge with NHS England and NHS Improvement. Did anybody know all of those existed? No, of course not. This new technology is predictive, preventative, personalised and participatory, I can never say that, medicine. The NHS at its core will be working around genetics in disease, reaching into the DNA of every man and woman in the UK. This app will monitor every aspect of your life, your shopping habits, your financial and social status, education, hereditary genomics, fitness and more will be feeding into the corporate superstate created by the COVID-19 crisis and powered by mass surveillance. According to NHSX, from 2020 to 2025, genomic medicine will be embedded into routine care. Now, what they want to do is actually get rid of big hospitals, apart from obviously acute stuff that they, operations and things. But the general care of people, they want to be done at home. So you open your computer up, you put in your app, and there's a doctor or even a bot. They're looking at bots instead of doctors to diagnose whatever you might have. And they're using a lot of genetics as they're saying that the driver of disease is genetics, but that's not true. Only 15%, or even less, I think, of the drivers of disease are genetics. It's all to do with lifestyle. Your health, your diet, your socioeconomic situation, everything. It's not driven by genetics, and that's what they're pinning it on. Why? It's because they want to look into your DNA and everything. It's very, very sinister, in my view. Now, I want to look at the absolute zero document because this is key. Now, I had this on my website for about 4 years before, and I did talk about it a lot. It's really come into play just recently with the whole net zero stuff. It's the UK Fires. It was published by UK Fires, and it's delivering the UK's climate change commitment with incremental changes to today's technologies. Now, this was commissioned by the government to be created from, I think it was Oxford University, Cambridge. A number of universities collaborated and put this together, but it was actually commissioned by our UK government. And it was debated in the House of Lords, and it's in Hansard, that it would be put into immediate implementation. So whether that needs to go through the House of Commons, but the ultimate... you can't see that too well, but you can't really see it at all. But it says, this is like a roadmap for what they want to... it's like a timeline of what they want to implement. And from 2020 to 2029, it's to close all airports except Glasgow, Manchester and London, and for 2030 to 2049 for all airports to close. So no flying in or out of the UK. Also shipping. No shipping in or out of the UK by 2030 to 20, between that period, they will stop it. They want to get rid of wood-burning stoves in your home, all gas appliances, gas stoves, gas heating, everything to be going onto electric. The building trade will be severely hit by, they're trying to get rid of concrete. All things that are deemed not sustainable, all in this timeline. So it's do look at it. You can look this up online. It's called the UK Fires Absolute Zero document, and have a look at, this is on page 4 where the timeline is. I mean, it's quite a big document, but what I gathered from it is that they want us not going anywhere, that we mustn't catch planes or go on a ship. And also imports and exports, no imports and exports. What will that do for us? We're an island and we're not growing anything. Are we going to be starved? This is what I'm looking at. And, I think we have to be really, our governments aren't on our side. We are the enemy. And we've got to really understand that our governments don't really like us. And the thing is that if we're all on electric, and this is what they're pushing ground source heat pumps, which are very inefficient in cold weather, they don't work. They're pushing for everybody to go onto electric everything. And so you don't have any autonomy if, for instance, the grid goes down, which it could well do. We're getting all sorts of solar flares. We could have a Carrington event any day now. And if you don't know what a Carrington event is, look it up. It could impact us hugely. And I think they're accelerating this because they know. And I've got to be honest, I think they know about what's going on in our solar system, because the sun has gone... I don't know if you take any notice of these solar mass ejections. We are being hit by solar storms, really strong ones every day. We could be taken out, and I think they're accelerating this. They want us all electric, so it can actually... we'd be cold, hungry and poor if this all went on. How am I doing for time? Am I all right? Yeah. Sorry? Oh, I can just keep on. Okay, lovely. Net zero is zero U, basically. You see, they're all up there. They're the haves, and we're the have-nots. They don't care. They don't care. Now, this is something that's coming in right now. It's called environmental and social governance. Now, this is literally the Chinese social credit system in the UK, and so this is particularly for businesses. Businesses will be under scrutiny to conform to the environmental and social governance contracts. This will cost them and will emerge as a climate tax on every business in the UK. Are your employees cycling to work? So suddenly you're responsible for everything to do with social governance and social contracts, and you can be marked down and closed down if you don't comply. If your score isn't good enough, because it's a score basically, you can be closed down. Are your employees cycling to work? Are you recycling, conforming to eco-regulations? Are you exercising diversity? Are you using clean technology? Are you using sustainable products? Is your workplace safe? And this is going to create massive bureaucracy for businesses. And also, it's a way of keeping everybody under this scrutiny the whole time and giving them a social credit score, which can be taken away if they don't comply and put out of business. So, this is the amount of social and governance score. Climate. So, in the environmental, it's climate change strategy, biodiversity, water efficiency, energy efficiency, carbon intensity, environmental management systems. And the social is equal opportunities, freedom of association, health and safety, human rights, customer and products responsibility, child labour. They make it sound as though it's very worthy, but the whole thing is scrutiny the whole time. Business ethics, this is under governance, business ethics, compliance, board independence, executive compensation, and shareholder democracy. You see, everything is underpinned by shareholders. So this is what we've got coming into our businesses. And for our homes, really, it's about retrofitting. And who has the money to retrofit their own homes, especially if you've got an old home? A lot of people who've got older houses, how are they going to make them energy efficient? Because this is what the performance certificates look like. We've had them for a long time on if you're selling your house, you have to have an energy performance. They'll make it impossible for you to rent or sell your property if it's not up to standard, and it's up to you to pay for it. It's up to you to pay for double glazing, loft insulation, all sorts of stuff that, not many people have money at the moment around to do that. So, and they're making it, again, tethered to your social credit score. So it's just like China, really. And we've also got the public-private partnerships. Public partnerships and NGOs are undermining politics in all Western government. Little do our MPs understand that big business is destroying representational government in the form of an oligarchy. These extremely powerful multinationals have the ability and are taking over the national governments globally to create global governance driven by greed. Corporate structure will undermine everything. It's the Russian-Chinese form of corporate communism or communitarianism. So really, I don't think our MPs have any idea that actually there's a plan to hand over the governance of each town and each region, they're calling them regions now, to the Covenant of Smart City Mayors. Now, that is directly accountable to the WEF and the C40 document. Does anybody understand C40, which is what brought in the 15-minute cities? This is all a C40 initiative. So the Covenant of Smart City Mayors, or they sometimes call them the directly elected mayors, our representative government is being destroyed by governance from the WEF, the United Nations, and they're unelected, unaccountable. We haven't voted these people in, and yet they are affecting the way we live. This is where we have to stand up and say no. We have to really, really be very grounded and understand that we cannot have these unelected people governing us under governance, not governments. And this is something to look at in your local town hall, do go into your town hall and find out what they're up to, because they're a corrupt bunch. They really are. You've probably seen my shenanigans in town halls, but they need to be held to account. And particularly, Ralph is going to be speaking about the climate literacy training later, which is, when somebody leaked that coursework to me, I was horrified. I did do a Richard Vobes and a UK column on it, but Ralph, being more of a climate scientist, can absolutely nail it with dissecting it. This is called the National Planning Policy Framework. Look at what they are up to in your town councils. Because all of this came out of the Earth Summit in 1992, the National Planning Policy Framework. Even then, they were trying to get this all put in so that they could control all town councils. Now, there's something quite worrying, which is the financialisation of nature. And I've been talking to a lot of farmers and people who work for the Forestry Commission and stuff like that, because the idea is that our natural areas in our, the national parks and everything, and woodland and any part of nature becomes a business. So they're trying to make the whole planet a massive business. That's what I'm seeing. It's all about the money. So you're finding that they call it new pastoralism enterprise model. So you've got farmers being told that they should actually turn their farms, stop growing food, stop having beef and dairy dairy and sheep production, and meat production. You've got to turn your farm into a business. And a lot of them are being told they've got to. And the man from the ministry comes around and says, your subsidies will stop. And the farmers that I'm dealing with in Somerset are saying that over 3 years, their subsidies are incrementally dissolving, and by the third year, gone altogether, if they don't turn their farms into businesses. And these businesses can be safaris, glamping. This is weird, that a lot of them are being told they should have dog walking fields with deer fencing all the way round, and some sort of key code on the front, and people can book a slot to walk their dogs. Now, I thought, well, what's wrong with walking your dogs in the woods or, the fields or the park or whatever? I can see something coming in where your dogs will be prevented from walking anywhere, and you will be forced, or if this, nobody can force us to do anything, but people will be encouraged to be walking their dogs in these rather strange pens, with deer fencing all around, and a key code on that. And I've seen two of them open up near me, and I've just thought, that's so weird. I don't quite understand that.
Will you be allowed to have a dog anyway?
Well, exactly. You see, they're now saying in the climate literacy training, it's not actually in the coursework, although the one-child policy isn't it, Ralph? It's have one less child. They did talk about that during the training, because I've got a bit of a mole who was there, and apparently they said your pets have a just as big a carbon footprint as you, and you'd be just as well to get rid of your pets. There you go. So yeah, even foraging needs to be a business. You've got to do foraging courses. You've got to. The whole thing is ridiculous. Anyway, yeah. I don't know whether to go into SEL learning, because I don't know how long we've got. SEL learning. Now, this is something that Bloomberg surveillance have been putting into schools, and it's quite worrying. It's about reading children's emotions. It's called social emotional learning. And it's about, because the children are using screens, the screens have got algorithms, the programs that they're using, the educational programs have got algorithms that pick up the child's emotions through the way their eyes, whether they blink or their eye movements. And it says, SEL learning claims to create the perfect global citizen. Children are monitored and surveilled throughout their education. Children are taught to be calm, practice mindfulness, consider others before themselves, to be proud to be part of a collective, and are encouraged to adhere to the 17 goals of Agenda 2030. Now, this is rolling out in our schools, particularly the whole climate change thing. Tokens are created on the blockchain when a child reaches its target. This is where the impact investor gets his reward for investing in futures on that child's outcomes. So it really is like betting futures, only it's on the blockchain with non-fungible tokens, if you could understand that. And it's a way of really betting on our children's lives and their outcomes. And this is happening in schools right now. And, you know, if you know, the best thing you can do is take your child out and get them homeschooled. Schools are adopting STEM education models. So that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the arts and things are being sort of sidelined because they want children to be really schooled in stuff that's going to really support the military-industrial complex that they're creating. And children will be rewarded with pay-for-success schemes and all sorts of things. Technology engineering. These will be the core subjects and funnel them into you know this whole sort of tokenization and stuff. The arts culture will be sidelined. Take your children out of school, and you know there's a wonderful woman in America called Lynn Taylor. She's called the Common Core Diva. She's doing a lot of work on this particular subject in America. She's an absolutely amazing woman. She's got a very deep Southern drawl, and she is incredible. And she's done so much work into SEL learning and trying to stop it in the States. She's marvellous. So this is how they capture all our information, is through surveillance. You know, once you see, this is why they want central banking digital system, you know, currency system, because I don't know if you've heard of the CBDCs. Has anybody? Yeah, and digital ID. This is what the governments are pushing to implement, and they tried to do it last course. It didn't work. Too many of us marched on London. It didn't work, but they're still pushing it. And the idea is, and that this is the whole cashless society thing. We need to keep our cash going. Keep using cash. Go to a cash point, get cash out, pay for things with cash. Because luckily, I heard the other day that cash since COVID has gone up again. We need to keep that going, because the minute we lose cash, we lose our ability to actually pay for things that are tangible. And we take it away from the control of the central banks, because what happens is that when you have a transaction between cash transaction between a seller and a buyer, it's completely anonymous. Nobody knows who you are, where you got the money, what's going on. If you then use a credit card, it's a transaction between you and the bank, and the seller gets their money at the end of the day. So your bank is bound by privacy to keep your data private. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but that's the idea. The minute we go onto a central banking digital system, it means that there is no privacy whatsoever. They can reach into all your data that's come from all different sources, from NHS, from your doctor, from everywhere, your shopping habits, everything. All of that will be there. For all to analyse and target you with advertisements or whatever, or even sanction you. If you go and buy a cake, it'll be recorded, and if you've got diabetes, they'll sanction you for buying cake. Do you see what I mean? It's that pernicious, where they will be looking at everything that you do. And we're just fast approaching something called the zero trust world, which means that you have to authenticate everything before you access your own information. For instance, at the moment we've got VPN. You can open your computer and access your emails with just a password, your own password. This is going to be a thing of the past, that the authentication happens when you use your credit card in a supermarket, for instance. You will have to authenticate who you are, because it deems that you're a criminal before you start. But that's what they say. They say we're keeping you safe, but actually it's a way of identifying you, because the facial recognition at the tills then authenticates with your credit card, and then you've got the authentication. So all of that information about what you've bought that day goes into this database. So, you know, everything's in one place. You've got identities, devices, network, apps, and you know, everything is all in one place. So the whole thing is about collecting your data, because data is the new gold. It's the way that this world will be working, because your data is worth an awful lot. It's the new oil, it's the new currency, and this is the way the New World Order wants to be able to tax you for all sorts of indiscretions that they might think. It's just like the Chinese social credit system. And so it's very important that we don't buy into the total top-down control of identity, you know, digital ID, or central banking digital currencies. And there you are. You know, this is how facial recognition works, and it will be linked to your mobile phone. Everything on your mobile phone will be able to be harvested, and this is how they know it's you. They'll authenticate with the facial recognition. And then, you know, we've got engineered food shortages happening with these wars and shortages and things. Let's hope that doesn't continue. But farmers are being paid to rewild their land, retire early with handouts for up to £100,000. We're not growing anything, not certainly enough to cover the losses of 40% of global Ukraine wheat and corn. Land being turned into garden villages, land taken over by development, solar farms, and set aside for housing. Greenfield sites, I should say, are earmarked for development. In the 1980s, we produced 85% of our food in the UK. It's now 45% and declining. And that's from the Food Security Report UK 2021. So we're not really, we're not growing enough to sustain our country. Now, this I thought was interesting because North Somerset, this is North Somerset, right? Now, they're the only ones that have actually done a mapping of their renewables, okay? So if you, this is all the land. Now, if you click on, there's a few things like the renewable thing, it's interactive. So you click on the renewables and the whole of the land actually lights up, and all of the land is taken up. This goes up to 2028, I think, with solar farms, wind farms, and housing. There's no land to grow anything or have sheep or cows or anything. All of that going up to 2028 is all renewables. So where's the food going to come from? I mean, this is the North Somerset coastline, where the farmers that I've been talking to, who are being told they're not allowed to produce dairy, meat, beef production, crops, anything, and that they will lose their subsidies if they don't comply to setting up businesses. So they're being told they mustn't farm. And what's interesting is that in Holland, they were more overt about it. They just said you can't use fertiliser. Therefore, because fertiliser is not good, apparently, for the environment. And so they said, well, nothing will grow. We provide all the food for Europe. Nothing will grow. So, and they did it overtly. And of course, the farmers just blockaded everything in their big tractors, and they won. Here, there's too many of us, and they're doing it incrementally. They're just going round to farmers. The man from the ministry turns up and says, have you thought about diversifying? Have you thought about the fact that we don't need meat production because that's all being phased out? Meat production's being phased out. We're going to be living on cricket flour and bugs and replacement protein, insect biomass. I mean, I did look at a report. It was the agricultural report, working report for the Soil Association, and they actually talked about robotic farming and insect biomass as replacement protein. This is what they have in mind for us. They don't want us to have meat, cheese, or anything else. So this is. I mean, and this is what they want to do: is cover our land with these hideous photovoltaic panels where you can't. Someone said to me, "Oh, well, they can always have sheep around the panels." Well, you can't, because your insurance makes it null and void, because sheep and cows nibble at the wires. So you can't. So you're losing all your farmland. So that's the way it is. And I just wanted. I was going to say something about. No, it'll come back to me. Food production. Yeah, anyway, it'll come back to me. Yeah, most of the food production, they're encouraging farmers to not farm. And so that they're doing it in a way that is incremental. And now the farmers are beginning to get together, because they were doing it sort of like going around to each farm. And now they're getting together. And I think we've got to have a mass farming protest about all of this. Outrageous, really. And then, of course, you look at this is a Ministry of Defence document, human augmentation, the dawn of a new paradigm. And you've got the Internet of Bodies. This is the World Economic Forum. This is where they've got this idea of merging man with machine. And the NOD are buying into this to create super soldiers, these, a bit like Elon Musk's Neuralink, where you have part man, part machine. This is a hideous transhumanist agenda, which I don't think it will work. I think enough people will, and we've got the destruction of the male and the female, transgender. I did see an article in Stonewall, and it was called "The Post-Gender World." Let's not have any sexes. Let's just. They've got a desire for a undifferentiated gender, easily morphs into the sexless cyborg, the transhuman. And this is why they want to get rid of sex. My daughter's a midwife, and when she first trained, when a baby was born, you had it was sex, male or female. Now it's gender assigned at birth. Gender assigned at birth. That means that later on it can be changed. This is all crazy world. And there we have, the undifferentiated human. So in the middle you have the traditional masculine and feminine. And then, of course, above you've got the androgynous, and then you've got the undifferentiated. And this is what they really want.
Is this from the United Nations as well?
Oh yes, yeah. This is all United Nations ideology, and then really they really want us to live in the metaverse. There's this whole thing. I don't know if anybody. I don't think this will work. Apparently, the uptake of the metaverse isn't working. Much to they get very annoyed about this, because it was their dream to actually have. Certain factions of them, and I have sort of put them into 4 groups, which I'll do just before I finish. Is that there's this whole thing where people like Yuval Harari and Elon Musk, people like that, Yuval Harari in particular, wants us to live in an alternative reality, because we won't be able to go anywhere. So you experience your life through a reality headset in your smart city apartment, because you can't go anywhere, you can't drive anywhere, you can't fly anywhere. So if you want to see the pyramids or, the Hanging Garden, they can't see the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, they've gone, haven't they? But, Petra or any of these big, wonderful places, then you can only do it through a virtual reality headset. So, the transhumanist dream is the escape from the material and embodied existence altogether. We become entities in an alternative reality that has nothing to do with disembodied spirit. The AI becomes God. You live in that artificial creation, and it's anti-nature, anti-human, and anti-creation, actually. So That's what they want. And there's this guy that's written a piece on reality privilege, which I thought was quite interesting, because you've got these futurists, people like Yuval Harari, who belongs to one of these groups that I've identified as really pushing this agenda. And he says, no, it's not. This guy called Bo Cronin says, there's an interview with Mark Anderson. He explained reality privilege like this. A small percentage of people live in the real world environment that is rich, even overflowing with glorious substance, beautiful settings, plentiful stimulation, and many fascinating people to talk to work with, and to date. Everyone lacks reality privilege and is therefore better off in the metaverse. So basically, the elite will avoid owning nothing and being happy. They redistribute their own hoarded wealth, and they'll have domination over the real world. They want everyone living in a virtual augmented reality, the metaverse, and are building a fake world for us to play in. Now, a lot of kids are being drawn into this, gamers. It's becoming a big thing. And a friend of mine, her grandson, wanted a new jacket for Christmas. She gave him £100, and he bought a jacket in the metaverse that he could wear, his avatar could wear. I mean, I couldn't make it up, so she was furious. Maybe I'll just talk about the different people that the different groups I've identified as kind of working for this agenda, because somebody said to me, who is really behind this? And I really thought about it, and I'm writing a book at the moment, and I sort of mused about who is behind all this, and actually it's a number of different groups of very wealthy individuals or groups or whatever. So in the first group is the kind of the WEF and the Bill Gateses of this world. They envision a new system that best suits their fancy, a technocratic system, where they need to manage and control people and assets of the planet. What they do see is that financial growth has slowed down or stopped. They're wanting to maintain their power by creating a new economic system that creates new markets and keeps track of an inventory on the planet, including the human workforce. They are wanting to cut cost in labour and thus automate as much as they can and bring in strict surveillance with AI, blockchain, ID systems, cashless society, etc. So then you've got another camp, which is the very rich people, the stakeholders, the ones that the investors, the impact investors, they see an opportunity to make vast amounts of wealth by investing in next generation technology. They don't really care about the ramifications of the common person, since they're not really in that part of the pool. All they see is financial wealth and power emerging in these new markets. If it means people are going to be hurt, then so be it. Their mindset is that it's collateral damage and it's nothing personal, but just business. Big Pharma falls into this camp. Then you've got the very wealthy scientific weirdos like Yuval Harari. Their belief is that we will one day become extinct if we don't act now and charge our evolutionary trajectory. Their belief is that we have a duty and a right to modify ourselves in a post-human way, namely transhumanism, whether by DNA speciation or emerging with machines as cyborgs or uploading our minds into cloud systems or a combination of them all. It's our choice. They believe that if we are to survive, we have to become like gods, which they think they are, and redirect human evolution and do so now. And then you've got the last camp, really, is the military-industrial complex. You have another camp, the military and intelligence camp, that feels we need to compete with China for AI, quantum computing and blockchain supremacy. And whoever wins this battle will become the rulers of the world. So the race is on, really, between China, Russia and America. For that to happen, data, lots and lots of data in real time has to be accumulated so that AI can do the predictive analytics needed to advance to the front of the global race. So, what we're facing with all these camps really is that, and I'm sure there are others, that are all working together to achieve a common goal, and that is digitalisation of the whole planet Earth. So we're in the crossfires of a digital war. That's I think they're all demented, really. They're intoxicated with power, greed and control, and they're filled with ego. Will the human condition disappear? Only if we let it. Tomorrow's not written. It is yet to exist. If you want to know the future, you have to make it yourselves. Otherwise, someone will make it for you. So as long as we say no, and there's enough of us, and there are, then the human condition will continue, but we're going to have to fight. You will have, because the transhumanists will want to alter the human species regardless of what anyone wants. It's our job not to give in. It's our duty to continue with the expression of the human species, the biological human, with all its faults and quirks. So that's my sort of put together of what there's different, factions at play here, and all kind of going for the same goal but for different reasons. But it's all led really by the WEF and the United Nations initially. The 17 goals, well, they've got one, which is end poverty. The reality is really make everyone equally poor. They want a digital footprint or credit mobile money access, blockchain identity solutions to enable economic identities for all and refugees. UBI for all people with a fixed amount of carbon credits, the analysis of social credit through digital footprint. It's just like the social credit system. End hunger. You see, the whole thing is, they say it's access to food, improved nutrition. It all sounds good, food security, low-cost GMO mass-produced food by Monsanto. Sensors and blockchain to eliminate waste, loss in food value. But the reality is that real food is replaced with synthetic lab food. Your consumption habits are recorded on the blockchain, monitoring sensors in waste bins, all of this thing. Goal 3, it's about, good health and well-being. They don't really care about health and well-being. This is it, predictive, preventative, participatory medicine. Smart wearables, keeping your Fitbit, get rid of Fitbits, they're really bad for you. But this is all being fed into, people are encouraged to wear these devices that will, are not good for them. So anyway, this is how they present the 17 goals, Quality education, well, I don't think really SEL education is quality education. They talk about reskilling and jobs for life. They want everybody working in sort of, well, they don't want everybody working. This is almost like a psyop because it's the robotics will be doing the work. So they're trying to get people to upskill for life, lifelong learning in a gig economy, which really is where nobody actually works for anybody. They work for themselves. It's like a gig economy. It comes from work, gigs. And so everybody will be working for themselves. So they'll be responsible for all their own, their what do you call them? Pensions and stuff like that. Yeah. And education will be remote, online, lifelong training in STEM, accredited with blockchain micro badges and credentials. And everything will have a social reputation and score, and children's outcomes determined from birth and AI guided biometrically. That's just a taster of some of the goals. But the thing is that these goals they're trying to implement them, and everything they try and do isn't quite working. The whole thing is really falling apart, in my view. They didn't imagine that we would actually have a pushback like we have. They used all out in the lockdown to advance these goals. They're not achieving them, and they are panicking, and it's like the throes of a dying dragon flailing about, and that's why they're throwing everything at us. So there's huge optimism, certainly from my camp, because a lot of people I'm speaking to are saying, well, you know, there's been progress in New Zealand where they've thrown out the World Health Organization, and we need to do the same. We need to really organise ourselves. When New Zealand can do it, even Australia has managed to get some movement towards getting rid of all the WHO, the UN, and the WEF from making decisions. And I think really a lot of it you can do in your local council. Challenge the net zero policies. I'm doing it in my council. I'm getting a lot of flack at the moment, but I don't care. And Colchester, the ladies in Colchester have had a most amazing time, and Ralph's been helping them. And I think if we all come together, Thetford also, in Suffolk, people are really coming out and trying their best to fight this and to do it in an intelligent and measured, peaceful way. And we can do this. The last thing we want is a revolution where everybody comes onto the streets and there's fighting. We have to do this. And as Rosa Corey said, she was my mentor. She's an amazing woman that wrote a book called Behind the Green Mask, and I think it's shoring up the projector at the moment. But she was my she was the most amazing woman who started fighting Agenda 21 in the 1990s, and she was the first one that blew the whistle in America. And when I started reading about it, I contacted her, and she sadly passed away in 2021. And she was amazing, and she was the one that really galvanized America to understand what's going on, and that America are really good at fighting this now. There's some states that are lost, but there's an awful lot of states that have thrown out Agenda 21, 2030. So it can be done, and we have to really consolidate and come together. And she always said, you will fight this best in your own communities, in your own town councils, because that's where the power is at the moment. We have to fight in our own councils before they become regionalised, and before the smart city mayors come in. We have to fight it in our councils. Go to your town council, find out what their policies are on climate, challenge them, and best of all, get into your town council. That's the best thing you can do, is infiltrate it. Okay, thank you. That's about all I'm going to do tonight. Thank you very much.